And are thrilled to be kicking off the fall and winter recruitment season with our favorite presentation of the year at Dalhousie. We are here today to talk to you about the Ottawa legal market. I am the Director of Associate Student Programs at Galley WLG in Ottawa. Danielle, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle. I'm a Senior Manager of Professional Recruiting and Student Programs at BLG in Ottawa.
Okay, so now, other than examples that we'll use from our firms to illustrate some of the points that we're making, that's probably the last that you'll hear about the firms that we work at. The idea of today's presentation really is to share with you about a legal market that we think is fabulous, that we're very invested in, and that we'd like to talk about with you today. So hopefully we're just navigating technology, so you have to apologize. You have to take our apologies if things don't work as smoothly as we'd like, which is what's going on right now. Try this. Okay, excellent. We are off to a good start. Okay, so the first thing, we are going to share a lot of information with you today. We promise you that. The first thing we'll ask is that you bear with us as we ask you to dig a little deep and self-reflect about what it is that you're looking at from a recruitment perspective. Things that you should think about before you apply are an assessment of your genuine personal interests, the practice areas that you're thinking about, the work environment that would best suit you, the location that you would like to work in, which employer and location would be the best fit for you. The more that you understand about what interests you, what your needs are, the better are the odds that you will find a fit with a legal employer. If a firm doesn't practice in an area that you think you may be interested in, you have to ask yourself whether or not that's worth pursuing it and putting the investment that it will take to apply to that firm. There are a lot of options. There are large full-service national firms like the ones that we work at, but there are also smaller offices. There are really great regional boutique firms, which we'll discuss in a moment what the difference is. There's in-house if you want to be in industry. There's certainly in Ottawa, there are government positions. You have to ask yourself about the work environment. Are you someone that would like to work in a more hybrid environment, or would you like to be in person? These are questions that we now ask in this new normal. Do you want a more formal environment or something that's more laid back? As I mentioned, what market do you want to work in? You are kind of setting the tone for the first steps of your career, and the market that you start in may indeed be the market that you end up for the remainder of your career. So you want to have thought about what city you will want to work in. Okay, so these are some of the Ottawa market basics that you have to consider. In Ottawa, we have a large number, a good presence of national full-service firms. But what those offices look like in the city of Ottawa may be different than other markets. So what BLG Ottawa looks like may be different than BLG Toronto. So it's going to be important as you're conducting your research and deciding where you'd like to apply to kind of have a sense of what those nuances are. The practice areas at one large national firm that's in two different cities may be different from one city to the next. So you want to research that, find out if you, for example, want to do entertainment law. That's something that's done in our Bay Street office. It's not done in our Ottawa office. So you'll want to have researched that. The culture and size of national firms may be different in different markets as well. So you want to look into that. It would be a mistake to assume that every law firm that has a presence in different markets is identical in all of those markets. In Ottawa, we have a really strong culture of local firms, regional firms that have excellent student programs. You don't just have to focus on the large international and national firms. We have fantastic local and regional firms. And we also have excellent boutique firms, which we'll talk about a little later. All right, so what kind of work is being done in Ottawa? And Danielle's going to get into this in more detail, but just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on in the city, we have a whole variety of work that's being done here, and it's good work. That's really the overarching message that we want to communicate today is there's a lot going on in Ottawa. And it's going on in all areas of law and likely the areas that interest you. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic over to Danielle, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about more specifics.
Yeah, so before we change,
do you want me to go back? I can do that.
Yeah, So before we change the slide here, coming into this presentation today, if you were thinking about, developing a career in Ottawa, what kind of legal work did you, think that you would be potentially doing? Any takers on the call? I will tell you that for the most part, when Danica and I do this presentation, and labor and employment, that's exciting. We often, when we do this presentation in person, we will, sort of ask this question, and a lot of students will say, oh, I bet you it's all government work. But in fact, it is not. So we'll go to the next slide. I think what we want to, expose students to with respect to the Ottawa market is that there is a significant amount of work that is totally unrelated to government. There's a lot of financial work being done out of Ottawa. I, have been actively recruiting for a financial services lawyer here in Ottawa. It's been difficult to find because there are not that many practitioners with that level of speciality here in the city. So we're looking for candidates that are interested in, financial services, in mergers and acquisitions, in securities, in tax, and so again, all of this is outside of sort of the respect of government work. And then on the litigation side, so that's the next slide, Danica. Same thing. I think when we've done this presentation before in the past, we've been told, oh, it's probably a lot of like family law. Well, family law is practiced here, but as Christian, I think, mentioned, there's labor and employment that is practiced here, a ton of commercial litigation. Ottawa is a really developing city, which is surprising because, of course, it's the capital. But we do a ton of construction development in this city. So obviously, there's a ton of construction litigation and a lot of alternative dispute resolution. So I think what we want to echo is that you don't necessarily have to go into a really big market to find these types of practices. If you want to have those types of practices, but you want to live in, a smaller market, maybe something that feels a little bit more like Halifax, for example, then that opportunity definitely exists here in Ottawa.
Great. Okay, so let's kind of look at what the market looks like, though, in terms of the size of most law firms in the city. So we've got here our inverted pyramid where we see at the largest part of the top, we see that most law firms in the city will range between 1 to 20 lawyers, and in decreasing amount go all the way to the firms that have 100 or more lawyers. So we are looking at a different size of office within the city, most doubt. But despite the fact that some of our offices are smaller, it doesn't mean that there's not a variety of work that's being done here. Ottawa is not all about what we have come to call Main Street law. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the type of office. Make sure that everybody is on top of the terminology. These are terms that are used kind of regularly when we're talking about the market. We've got full service firms and boutique firms. So what does that mean? So for full service firm like BLG and like Gowling, offer a full range of legal services to their clients. It's not just a clever name. So it's a one-stop shop for clients. They come to us, whatever their legal needs are. I know that they can find lawyers that specialize in those areas. But that's not just an advantage for clients, it's also an advantage for students who might not know exactly what it is that they want to learn about, the type of lawyer that they want to be. So if you want to get a broad exposure
Miami,
to
Texas,
many,
one of them, yeah, tab places.
I think we've got someone that's not muted. So if you want a broad exposure to different practice areas or simply aren't sure what kind of law you ultimately want to get involved in, this might be a good option for you. It'll allow you to test drive different areas. But not every full service firm has the same type of student program. So you're going to want to ask a lot of questions about what the program looks like. What's the structure of it? What do the rotations look like? Some firms have some do not. How are work assignments delegated to students? Are you assigned a specific practice group? These are all questions that you should ask because every firm is very different. All right, so the other option here is we have is boutique firms. Now, I think sometimes it's a bit of a misnomer because people think of a boutique firm as necessarily small, and it's not about the size of the firm. It's about the uniqueness in what they practice. So a boutique firm will practice in exclusively one area. So we have a number of boutique firms, and we'll kind of get into what those are, but these would be ideal for students that already have an idea of what it is that they want to learn about, what kind of law they want to practice. This will be ideal when you want to give yourself a targeted learning experience where you're really honing in on your skills that are related to that specific practice area that you've already identified as being the area that you want to work in. All right, so what kind of boutique firms hire students if you want that targeted experience? Well, all sorts of them do. We've got business law firms and real estates and wills and estates and family law, of course, and criminal law firms. We've got great IP boutique firms in the city of Ottawa. As we mentioned earlier, there's fantastic employment law firms, both employer side, labor or employment. There's civil litigation firms. An example would be personal injury. There's administrative law. Anything that you want to do, if you have a targeted interest, you can likely find a firm that specializes either mostly or exclusively in that area. Danielle mentioned that government is not the only thing that's done in Ottawa, but it certainly is done. So if that's something that you're interested in, clearly there are 3 levels of government that students can get involved in. We've got the federal government. Word to the wise, the Department of Justice generally does not have summer positions. So if you're looking to work with the federal government, the Department of Justice, that is a fantastic opportunity. You're going to target that during your articling recruitment process. That's when you're looking for DOJ positions. But we've also got the federal crown, the provincial government, and then of course the city of Ottawa, that also hires students. They have a great summer and articling program as well. All right, so just like the size of our firms tend to be different in the city, so do necessarily the size of our student programs. One kind of goes along with the other. So in this pyramid, we see that at the top of the pyramid in the narrower area, you see a large grouping of articling or summer students, and then growing in amount as the size of the cohort decreases. So you'll see that many firms, boutique and smaller offices, regional and local, will have maybe only 1 or 2 summer or articling students that support their professionals. There are some that have 3 or 4, 5 students, and then of course, some firms that have larger cohorts. So there's no better or worse scenario in terms of what a student cohort size looks like. That again is a question of self-reflection. You just have to ask yourself what it is that you're looking for from summer or articling experience. Do you want to be in a firm with a large student cohort where you're working collaboratively with a number of folks that are at the same age and stage as you? Or would you like to work in a smaller, more independent group where you're maybe the one go-to person for the entire office? Either one of those scenarios is fantastic. It's just really, again, about reflecting about what it is that you're seeking from those student programs. Pro tip: if you're looking at a program that has a larger student cohort, you're likely going to be asked questions during the interview that are related to teamwork and collaboration. You heard it here first. If you're interviewing anywhere where there's a large student group, we are going to ask you questions about your teamwork and collaboration. Have thought about it in advance and have a really great answer prepared to that question.
So obviously coming into recruits can be really overwhelming. You may be a first generation law student and not necessarily have a ton of insight into the different firms and what they have to offer. And so it's, how do you go about researching the firms to figure out what they all do and whether or not what they have to offer sounds of interest to you? There's a variety of different ways that you can do this. The schools will publish information about, which employers are applying. It'll include job postings, things of the like. The firms all have amazing websites that you can do research through. We always recommend reaching out to summer and articling students. No better source of information than the students that have been in our programs. They are able to guide you and share with you what their experiences have been like. And then also, of course, the VI portals. If you're not aware yet, VI Law is the portal where most of the law firms will request that your applications be submitted. And there's information about the different firms and their job postings that's available there. But probably the number one research tool for students is NALP. So NALP is the National Association of Law Placement. And they have a central database where all of the firms, even large firms like myself, like BLG and like Gowling, we will have separate pages for each one of our individual offices. Because as Danica noted at the top of this call, while we all operate, under the same umbrella, what our offerings are from office to office can be a little bit different. But what's great about the NALP site is that essentially it's sort of a one-stop shop. You can go in there, you can put the name of the firm that you want to get information on, and the page for that particular firm will pop up. It's a bit easier digesting information through the NALP website than necessarily funneling through a lot of the firm websites. The reason why is firm websites are generally meant to be client-facing, not necessarily being used from a recruitment perspective. So sometimes the information is there, but it might be a little bit difficult to find. Whereas the website for NALP, for the Canadian Directory of Legal Firms, you will find information that is specifically related to the recruitment of students. It's a fantastic resource, so we recommend that you check all of that out. There are some updates that typically happen on that website in and around December. So if you're thinking about, applying for the 2L recruit that comes up in January, you're going to want to look at that site starting in December when the firms update their different pages. All right, next slide. Of course, there's even more things that you can do research on your own. Of course, connecting with members of the firm, whether that be reaching out to lawyers. Lawyers are always happy to chat with young students about the practice of law, connecting with law students, as we mentioned, or attending sessions like the one you're attending today. Obviously, this is more particular in terms of the Ottawa market, but different firms will conduct different sessions to promote their own firms. It's a great way to learn about the different firms and what they have on offer. So Ottawa's processes are unique to the Toronto market in that we don't hire at the same time. So for example, the first recruit in our cycle is intellectual property. So Danica, so Gowlings right now, BLG, Osler, Brion Refoul, MBM International, and Aiken and Klee are all actively recruiting students for our 2025 summer student program in intellectual property. Most of the firms will be looking for first-year students and or second-year students. And so the information on what type of student the firm is looking for is available in that VI Law portal job posting. It'll outline if the firms are looking for first years or first and second years. Students who are interested in that will want to apply before the 15th of October. The portal is going to close at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We're going to run interviews through to the end of October, and we'll be making offers on Halloween. So we hope we don't spook you out when we start calling. I'm going to assume, because everybody's on mute, that they laughed at my joke because that was a good one. So in terms of the general summer student recruit, that's when we're hiring for corporate and dispute students, and that is focused generally on second year students. That runs in January and February here in Ottawa. And so we're going to be accepting applications for that up to midnight on the 16th of January. Interviews will run through January and February, and our call day this year is going to be on Friday, February 28th. In terms of articling student recruitment, so if you're thinking about an articling position, if you're qualified to article for the 2026-2027 term, that is going to take place in May and June. This is the recruit that is governed by the Law Society. So they set the time frame for this. The dates are not quite yet available, but generally they are always in May and June, and that of course is directed at third year students, as well NCA and internationally trained students may be interested in applying for that, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't be qualified for a second year summer. Any interested NCA and internationally trained student could certainly apply for the 2L summer position and article the following year.
All right, so as Danielle mentioned, the articling recruit is regulated by the Law Society. The general 2L and IP recruits are not. They are governed by an agreement between the Ottawa employers and all of the faculty members in terms of what the standard procedure should be. We meet every spring, late spring, early summer. We talk about dates. We talk about what went well, what could be improved, how students were feeling once they're surveyed about the process. And we collaboratively set the stage for the next following recruitment periods. Probably about 2 years ago, the market engaged in conversations about establishing an agreement that would kind of set out the terms that have always been agreed upon in terms of a fair and equitable procedure in the city of Ottawa. So we now operate under a protocol and agreement. This agreement is presented to all employers in the Ottawa market for signature. It really does promote transparency and a continued commitment to a fair hiring protocol. We've always been proud of how recruitment has taken place in our market. It's very collegial, but this also allows the students to see what the terms of that agreement are and which firms have actually signed on to it. So I think one thing I should mention is that the agreement is available to all of you to see when you're participating in a particular recruitment process. So come the 2L recruit, it is already signed and ready for the IP recruit, but students can access a copy of that agreement so that they can see the terms. They can identify which employers have signed on agreement. That could help in their decision making. But what you need to know at this point, but certainly read the agreement for yourself. Don't take my word for it. But major terms, no calls should take place. Danielle, spoke about spooking you at 8 a.m. on Halloween. No calls should be happening in that IP recruit prior to 8 a.m. And that is done to not only level the playing field for employers, but also to make sure that it's as equitable and fair and friendly a process for students themselves. We don't want students feeling pressure. There is a rule that says that there's no insisting on hearing the student's ranking of law firms or a commitment to accept an offer prior to call day. Firms will not be putting pressure on students to hear where they're landing in terms of their choice or whether they'd accept an offer from us should we extend one on call day. These are all conversations that should not be happening, and the protocol clearly states that firms should not be engaging in that. As I mentioned, all firms have had the opportunity to sign the agreements. Students can see who signs them. It is the firms that are the keepers of the agreement. Danielle just ended her term. She was the keeper of the agreement for the last 2 recruitment cycles. Thank you for that, Danielle. It was very much appreciated. I have joined on for the next 2 recruitment cycles. I'm joined by a regional firm, and I will also be joined by a boutique firm as the 3 employers that are overseeing that agreement. And we're there to kind of receive comments from students and from other employers as to how the recruitment went, and then maybe bring to the market's attention should there be violations of the agreement. The rules, as I mentioned, have been agreed upon for a very, very long time in our market. So whether or not a firm signs on to the agreement itself, whether or not the signature is there, those firms are still subject to that fair protocol. So I encourage students to have a look at what those rules are and to take note if behavior is not complying with it, whether or not the firm's a signatory, because we all are committed to making sure that this process is transparent and equitable and fair, and that it to the degree that it can, remove some of the stress that's involved in this recruitment process. I'm not kidding myself. I know it's a stressful process, but there are certainly things we can all do together to make sure that it's the best process that it can be. So stay tuned. The faculties will be circulating those agreements right prior to the recruitment processes that you will be participating in. All right. So I said we were going to give you some information as to how to master this recruitment process, and that is this part of the presentation. So you may be asking yourself, what are employers looking for in successful candidates? It is admittedly a very competitive process, but we're going to share some information that's going to help you feel really comfortable in it and put your best foot forward. So things that employers may be looking for. And I should probably reiterate that we're talking from our perspective here. Different folks may be looking for different things, and you're well within your right to reach out to people and ask them questions so that you're best prepared for this recruitment process. But things that are generally applicable for all employers. They're looking for dedication. They're looking for enthusiasm, initiative, diligence, an ability to work well with others, leadership when appropriate, students that can show good judgment, that have problem solving skills, that can show resilience, that have some experience or an interest in client service. Obviously, we're also looking for strong legal research and writing skills. We trust in our partners in at the faculties that they're making sure that those skills are all up to date and the best that they can be. And we're also looking for long-term interest in what the firm or office does. So we're going to talk in the next slide about how you're going to show that long list of qualities, how you can illustrate those. But in terms of long-term interest in what the firm does, you will demonstrate that through a recruitment process by having conducted your research, by knowing a little bit about the employer that's interviewing you and who you're engaging with. So we will be certainly interested in hearing about how our firm fits into your career goals. All right, so how do you demonstrate that long list of qualities that I've set out? Well, there are a lot of ways to do that. Most firms will take a holistic approach. I think Danielle and I would agree that if the only factor that we looked at were grades and transcripts, our jobs would be so much easier. We review a lot of CVs, and certainly while looking at a grade point average would be an easy way to include someone or exclude someone from a process, our stakeholders have asked us to have a broader outlook than that. We're looking for whole people that are bringing their true selves to the process. So we're not just relying on grades. So we're taking a holistic approach. So things that we will look for. Grades, yes. It's just not going to be the only thing that we look at. And you have to just ask yourself what a grade is, right? You've got an independent, objective third party that's telling us that you've done really well in those proven areas that make for a good lawyer. So like legal research and writing and advocacy or moot court, all those things. So certainly grades will matter. Different firms will weigh them at varying levels. So you can inquire to that as well. It's not the only thing though. We are looking at work experience for sure. I talked about client service. I talked about showing enthusiasm and dedication. Those are qualities that can be shown through your work experience. Community involvement, very interested. We want to hear how you're giving back. We want to know that your core values line up with ours, but also we want to know that you're someone that can multitask. The life of a summer student, of an articling student, and of a lawyer is a busy one. So a student that's able to maintain a decent grade point average and also give back to the community shows us that you have an ability to manage multiple things. And of course, any achievements that you want to share with us, we're super interested in hearing about that. We want passionate and driven people. And there are many ways of showing that. It can be an achievement that that was accomplished through the arts, through sport, through academics. There are a variety of ways. So we're interested in learning all about you. And these are ways that all of those qualities that I've talked about on that first slide can certainly be demonstrated.
So this may be the first time that you've ever applied for a legal position. Maybe you've been waiting for the Ottawa recruit, or maybe you've been waiting for the intellectual property recruit. And so, again, it can be really overwhelming figuring out how you go about this process. So, in terms of the starting point is always that VI Law portal that we discussed. So, if you just Google VI Law, so VILAW, it will bring you to the portal. As a student, you'll be able to make an account in there, and you'll be able to access information about the different recruits that are taking place, not just here in Ottawa, but across the country. Why that portal is so important, why it's important for you to familiarize yourself with it, is because pretty much every law firm uses it to collect the applications. So this is where you're going to be directed to submit applications. So again, there'll be a job posting there, so you can read about, which firms are hiring and what their protocols are for hiring. Now, you're going to want to make sure that you apply only once. And so typically, if that means that if the firm has asked you to submit that information via VI Law, you'll only put the information into VI Law. No need to email the application separately or to mail it in or anything along those lines. You're going to want to make sure that all of your applicant materials are in good shape. So you're going to start those off in Word, make sure that they look crisp and clean, and then you're going to PDF those and upload them to the portal. You want to be really careful about shutdown for the portal. So for example, for intellectual property, the portal is going to shut down at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday, October the 15th. Now, what that means is it's not that you have to be in the portal by that time to be able to upload your applications. It means that the whole portal will disappear at that time, meaning even if you are in the portal and you're uploading your applications, the minute that it hits 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, the whole system will shut down. And we do encourage you not to leave it to the last minute because of the fact that a lot of students are in there, on the very last day, and that can make putting things in very slow. It can create glitches in the system. So we encourage you to apply as soon as you can. Now, earlier I talked about making sure that you look at, the job posting for each of the firms, because what firms are going to want in terms of their applicant materials is going to be different. For example, for intellectual property, our colleagues over at Briand Rafoul, they want a writing sample. So you would submit that to them. However, over at Gowlings, for myself here at BLG, I just did a presentation with our colleague Rama over at Osler's. That's not something that we're going to require. So you want to follow the directions of each of the firms very specifically. So look at those job postings, look at the information that your career development office is offering in terms of what constitutes a complete application for each of the firms. You're going to want to make sure that those materials are, again, crisp and clean, that they've been reviewed, that there are no grammar, no spelling mistakes in there. And you want to make sure that you are expressing, obviously, an interest in the market, in the firm, and in the types of law that the firm practices. Okay. So I'm going to let you in on a little secret. The cover letter is the most important document that you will submit during a recruit process. Now, why do you think that is? Any guesses? All right. Well, I'll give you the response. This is because it is your writing sample. And so for most of the firms, as I mentioned, they're not going to ask you for a formal writing sample. Your cover letter is your writing sample. It tells us how you write, how you structure, how persuasive your writing can be. So I will tell you that it is the document that we agonize over. It is not your transcript. It is your cover letter. It's meant to showcase who you are. And so you want to catch the reader's attention when you are, addressing the firm and addressing your interests. So, what you want to make sure that it presents what your strengths are. It should present what what qualities you have that are going to make you successful as a student at that firm, and it's going to tell your reader why you're interested in the firm as well, right? Because the cover letter, again, it's about your writing skills. So this is essentially the first time that you're going to present something to a client, right? So myself, Danica, Rama, all of us that read those, we are essentially your first clients. You're going to want to think about what are you presenting to your client. Now, one of the things that has come up, and Danica, jump in if I miss anything, because this is the first time we're ever talking about this particular point. But one of the questions that has come up in the last little while is how to use AI, or should students be using AI when they are drafting their materials? We all know that these tools exist. Your schools may have different policies or protocols on how AI is used in your learning. And to the same point that firms have their own policies and protocols in terms of how AI is used in practice. Now, we're not silly enough to think that students are not going to look at those tools as, support in sharpening their materials. But what we want students to understand is that it shouldn't be the basis for creating their materials. Remember, this cover letter is supposed to be about you, right? So AI, it probably isn't the greatest space to generate, a telling of you. Who are you and what is your story? I think it's also important to understand that at most of the firms, they will have one screener. So one person reading all of the materials. And so you can imagine, if we are screening materials and we say, goodness, I've read this cover letter like 7 or 8 times now. We're going to know that it's come out of an AI tool and isn't necessarily your own creation. And so I think it's really important to consider, how that is used and why we really want students to steer away from using it as the basis to craft their materials. Now, if you have used AI to craft your materials, be prepared for us to ask questions about it. Why did you choose that? I would expect that firms, will ask questions about that. Danica, anything that you want to add on that front?
Yeah, just me. Thank you, Danielle. I think that was really a great kind of synopsis of kind of the things that the firms are thinking about when it comes to AI. One thing that you should know is that there AI can detect AI as well. So while I'm not engaging in having every cover letter put through an AI program to detect if it was drafted by AI, some firms are. We attended the NALP conference in Boston just this past spring, and it was the hot topic. A lot of American firms are engaging in really kind of sophisticated ways of working with AI, and that was one of the examples, right? So just be prepared, to Danielle's point, that firms are getting better at detecting it. So be ready to have a candid conversation about it. Did you have, any help with the drafting of the materials? A sincere answer, like I did. But I did use my critical and legal mind to reviewing the documents once it was created, and I did put my my vote of approval on it, my stamp of approval, but I am learning to use a tool that will be available to me throughout my legal career, and I'm learning to do so effectively and ethically. That is a reasonable answer to that question. Just be prepared to discuss it if you're using any kind of AI help with your documents, I think.
And before we move to the next slide, I think it's important for us to, let you know that we don't use any AI in the screening of your materials. We are the machines. Myself, Danica, Rama over at Osler's, all of us, we take the time to sit down and read through absolutely every single one of those applications. We don't have any tools that we run those materials through before making decisions. All right, we'll go on to the next slide. So in terms of your CV, this is the second most important document. So you want to make sure that your CV is clear, that it's concise, that it is well structured. You're going to want to put your experiences in chronological order. You're going to want it to have obviously a professional tone, and you're going to want to format that as a PDF. And then in terms of what not to do, so next slide. Avoid, really crazy, elaborate templates. When we do a recruit, for IP, for example, I think we're all expecting somewhere in around 200 to 250 applications, depending on how many students we are recruiting for. And we have about 3 days, Danica, to get through all of them. And so you can imagine when we get these crazy elaborate, templates, it's difficult for us to get to information really quickly, and it can slow us down. And so just a very plain, straightforward CV does not have to be fancy at all. Be careful with your fonts. Sometimes when you cut and paste information, it can change fonts. And so you want to make sure that you do one last, correction of that before you submit. Obviously, use your spell check, use your grammar check, because we want to look for your attention to detail. I think also when you look at the cover letter, that's one page. 4 paragraphs. You want to probably have a 10 or an 11 point font for that. When you look at your CV, that's going to be no more than 2 pages. We're talking about really precious real estate. So I think our biggest point of advice in CVs is really don't focus on what's obvious. So for example, if you've worked in a fast food restaurant, which don't cut that out. We love to see McDonald's. We love to see Tim Hortons. We love to see situations where you were working with the public. That is such an incredible skill to have developed, that client service, that those public facing positions. So please keep those in your CVs. But you would want to focus on telling your reader what they can't possibly know about your experience during that time versus what we could know generally just from having been customers in those places on our own. So for example, we would assume that if you've worked at McDonald's that you would, have been, working a cash register, or, you would have cleaning duties, but perhaps, you want to focus in on experience in the drive-through when you are, working multiple machines at the same time. You're working on long lineups, you're prioritizing, with prioritizing your tasks. That really does help us understand how you multitask. Maybe you won a client service award. Maybe you were employee of the month as voted on by your peers. Well, it tells us that you're somebody who's really great to work with. So I think it's important to focus on, what we can't possibly know versus what can be obvious just based on our own experiences having been customers in those industries.
Is that me, Danielle? All right. So in terms of interviews, there's a few things that we want you to remember. First of all, the interview period in the Ottawa market is a little bit longer than it is in other markets. So Danielle kind of set out the dates there. So you want to really note those. So you're going to want to have some dedicated time set aside for those interviews. Note that in Ottawa, we've all agreed, the employers have agreed that whether students attend in person or virtually would not negatively impact their candidacy. So you can choose to participate virtually during the recruitment process. You'll want to assess how that works for you and how that allows you to put your best foot forward in the recruitment process. But we've got a lot of flexibility there. And like I said, no negative inferences drawn at all. You'll definitely want to practice your interview. It's meant to be a casual conversation. There's no doubt about that. And you're an expert in you. So we expect that you'll be able to properly conduct an interview, but have practiced out loud, because sometimes it's not intuitive. We're not always great at that elevator pitch. You'd be surprised at how ill-prepared some students are for very obvious questions. You're not going to know every question that's going to be asked of you in an interview, but certainly you can expect, tell us about yourself. And I say that a little facetiously, but you'd be surprised at the number of students that struggle with that very simple question. You're meant to be an expert in that, but have practiced your answer out loud so that you can share it in a way that's meaningful and that is engaging and that doesn't take up too much time. Have practiced it, because I see students go from, tell me about yourself, and their answer is, I am a 2L student at Dalhousie Law School. And you know what? I cracked that code. I know that because I've read your application materials. But the flip side of that is, well, it all starts off when I went to kindergarten in Canada. That time I was really proud because I won an award for safe usage of scissor handling. And then I moved on to first grade. That would probably be too much information for tell me about yourself. So have thought about it in advance. Come up with a very concise but compelling way to tell us about who you are. Like I said, it's meant to be informal. You're meant to tell us a story about you, but everything that you say should really be about promoting your candidacy and have a point of really highlighting your profile. Have asked questions to the interview panel or the recruiter like Danielle and I ahead of time, so they have as much information as possible. You get to know the types of questions that we're going to ask. You get to know how many people will be in a room. Will it be one interview? Will it be a panel? Are they going to ask substantive questions? I know that we do not ask substantive questions, but I caution you, word to the wise, if you raise something that is substantive in nature, you got to be ready to dance that dance. You want to be able to conduct that conversation in a persuasive and meaningful way. So we're not going to ask you about Donahue versus Stevenson, but if you bring it up, we're going to want to engage with you in a meaningful way. So have prepared your answer. Oftentimes you'll know ahead of time who will be in the room with you. You'll know who the interviewers are, and that's a great place to start in terms of preparing and showing your interest in the firm by knowing a little bit about the interviewers. But lawyers are very busy people, and inevitably I will show up on interview day and the person that I expected to bring in the room with me is just not going to be available. So don't be upended if the person that you're expecting to be there is not there. Oftentimes you will have prepared the questions that you will ask at the interview, at the end of the interview, in function of who's in the room. But maybe have a couple of general interview questions just ready in your back pocket in case the interviewers are not who you expected. Back to the point about those questions at the end of the interview, it's a very important part of the process. It's not just so that you can inform yourself, and it is. We want you to ask questions so that you make an informed decision. But we're also gauging your interest in what we do based on the questions that you ask us. So be resourceful. Don't ask us questions that you could have easily have found the answers to. We have a lot of information on the VI portal. We have a lot of information on our student page on the website. So asking us if we have a rotation program or if you'll be assigned a mentor, I'll answer those questions. I'll happily answer them, but you could have asked a question that showed a little bit more interest and a little bit more resourcefulness. So have thought about that ahead of time. Best of all, just remember to have fun during the interview process. We really are it's a collegial market. We're just trying to get to know you. We don't want it to be any more stressful than it has to be. So enjoy that process because we're certainly enjoying getting to know you. All right, and now this is just a grab bag of what not to do during the recruitment process or during an interview. Don't make us work so hard. We love what we do, but when every question that we asked is answered with yes or no, we have to work really hard. And even a 17-minute OCI interview can feel like the longest 17 minutes of our lives when you're not engaging with us. So be engaging. If the inevitable question comes up of whether or not you've only applied to Ottawa firms or did you participate in another market process, be honest about that. In a national firm, I can tell if you've applied to my Toronto office. So you don't want to be insincere about that. But also don't tell us you did it as backup or just to practice because you really want to be in an Ottawa office, because we're close to our colleagues in the other offices and we'd hate to think that you participated in their recruitment process just as a practice round. I mentioned already, don't ask questions where the answers are easily available to you. Be resourceful. Also, this is kind of just pro tip, don't be negative in an interview. Remember that you're at your most professional in those 30 minutes or those 20 minutes or the 17-minute OCI. So you want to be as positive as possible. Don't be negative about other students at your faculty. If you're asked about a challenge, which is often a question, you know, don't blame your partner in the moot for something have gone wrong. You know, be self-reflective about it. Take ownership of issues. So don't be negative about other students. Don't be negative about your professors. We have close relationships with faculties that you go to or other firms. This is a very, you can tell by Danielle and I both being here together that we are good and close colleagues. And while we compete with one another, we respect one another. Danielle runs an excellent student program. Students, we lucky to work with her, and I think that she may feel the same way about the students that join us. So we are a collegial environment, so I would hate to hear negative thoughts about other firms or your experiences as you participated in the Ottawa recruit. So those are just some things to keep in mind. And then I'm not sure if any of you are from the Ottawa area. If you are, I have a captive audience, and I don't have to sell you on how wonderful this city is. Working and living in Ottawa is fantastic. Those are just some of the highlights. You know, it's an all-season city that has wonderful things to offer throughout. You don't have to come from Ottawa to want to be in Ottawa. I came to Ottawa to go to law school, and I never left. So, you know, students often ask about, do I have to have a connection to the city? If you have one, share it, but you don't have to have a specific family connection to the city to simply want to be here. We think it's a great place to be. All right, Danielle, anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think we've covered it. Sean?
Yeah.
No, any questions from students? I guess I'll ask a question if that's all right.
Oh, sure.
So it's kind of related to the IP recruitment. And just I get students in sometimes they don't have a science and engineering background, and they're always wondering, should I apply? Should I go for it? Or what are perhaps other avenues that they're interested in IP if it's not strictly auto IP? I wonder if you could just speak to that a little bit.
Sure, I'll start, and Danielle, you pipe in because different firms have different positions on this. Some firms look for STEM or hard science backgrounds. We do a lot of pharmaceutical litigation at our firm. So folks that have those technical backgrounds are certainly sought after, but we don't exclusively hire students with those backgrounds. So if you have a genuine interest in IP, then I would encourage you to apply. And I think that that's the most important thing. It's a genuine interest in IP. We can pick up very quickly a student that simply wants a 1L position, but really is not that interested in IP law. But you don't have to have the science background to want to practice in IP law for sure, particularly when you think about copyrights and trademarks. There's a lot going on that doesn't necessarily have to do with sciences directly. And for those students that have an interest in IP and are not sure if they want to participate in a specific IP recruit, don't forget that in full service national firms, students that are hired either through the business or the advocacy recruitment during the 2L recruitment in February may also have an opportunity to have a rotation in the IP department and will certainly get exposure that way as well. Danielle, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just in terms of figuring out, well, which firm does and which firm doesn't, require this hard science background. The portal is actually open right now. So you can view the job postings for each one of the firms currently, and they'll outline in that whether or not they are looking for, a hard science background. And so BLG doesn't, but there are some firms in Ottawa that do. And so that'll be a great resource to figuring out if you don't have that hard, science background, but still have that genuine interest in intellectual property, where your application is going to be happily received.
That's
I think
great.
Christian had a question. I can't talk.
Is it appropriate to reach out to, you guys go ahead, you can read this.
So is it appropriate to reach out to a firm, or should we be reaching out to lawyers at the firm? And I think I missed something earlier. Did we say should be reaching out to you or people in the position of your firms to know who's involved in the interview? So in terms of like reaching out, I definitely encourage individuals to reach out to lawyers and to students. You can imagine that when we come into a recruit period, and it's actually my pro tip today on LinkedIn, that Danica and myself, for example, we get a tremendous number of requests for coffee chats, and it's almost impossible to honor every single one of them. So sometimes we feel like, well, if we can't honor all of them, you know, we've got to figure out how we get that information, how we get that connection to students in other ways. And so reaching out to lawyers and reaching out to students at the firms, absolutely. And so in terms of figuring out, you know, who's going to be involved in interviews, we typically disclose that information when we send the interview invitation to you. And so it will include, you know, for example, I think most of us do a virtual interview first. And so we'll be sending out a link to our virtual platform. It'll tell you how long the interview is going to be, and it'll have information about who the interviewers will be on that day. Danica?
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, in terms of reaching out, and I agree with you, Danielle, in terms of reaching out to professionals, you're always welcome to reach out to lawyers, to students. We can certainly help if you have a targeted question, you don't know who the best person would be, we can help direct you. I've just put up our contact information there. Be mindful though of not reaching out to too many lawyers in one shop. We've seen that where students have just been, their net has just been too broad, and they've reached out to a number of people, in which case the contacts are become less meaningful. Odds are those lawyers are then bouncing their responses to me, and I'm seeing that student may have kind of disrupted too many people. So just be mindful of making them targeted requests for those folks that can actually bring something to the table and provide you with some solid information.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Quickly, I think running out of time, so I just want to thank Danielle again. Great to see you, and so it's always so nice to have you guys here at this time of year. And as always, wonderful, great advice for our students. And I will say as well, we'll hope to see you in January as we do Ottawa OCI as well. So we hope to see you in January then. And thanks everyone who attended. And this is recorded. If you want to listen again, it'll be up on Montreal Cloud. So take care, everybody. Thanks very much.
Good luck with the recruitment processes, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.